Thursday night football is upon us, and this game actually looks kind of fun. It's Saints-Rams today, and of course, what we're going to do is we always do here on Splash Play. We're going to build lineups three different ways. First off, I'm going to hand build a lineup using the advanced analytics that I swear by for Sports Info Solutions, Pro Football Reference, and a few more. Roll them together in one beautiful data milieu. Of course, next up, we're going to optimize lineups after looking at the projections and ownership projections from Stochastic to find out where the pure math is going to drive people to build lineups tonight on DraftKings. And last but not least, we're going to sim lineups to find out who are the must plays of this slate. And of course, last but not least, I'll give you guys three takeaways, three pro tips even to build unique lineups for the slate tonight. Of course, Saints-Rams Thursday night football showdown. Let's get into it. And of course, appreciate all you guys being here live, watching after the fact, all of that as we go. But we got to get into this one because it's an interesting one for sure, where Kyren Williams, I have to imagine, going to be one of the chalkiest plays of the day. Top projected play, it looks like so far. Of course, we'll look at the projections more in a moment. Kyren Williams, the workload's been great. And he's actually one of few guys, too, where over the course of a year, he's actually getting more and more work as the weeks go on, where he is now up to 5.7 red zone touches a game, 2.8 inside the 10-yard line per game. Kyren Williams is one of the best roles in football right now. Is his talent level quite there? I wouldn't say that so much. He is a negative 0.36 EPA per target guy, 0.1 EPA per rush, so the run game definitely looking better for him, and that is one as well where that EPA per rush has been soaring upwards over the last few weeks, so he's been really getting a lot of effectiveness as that goes. So Kyren, to me, I think with 25 implied points on the table, I find it very hard to fade Kyren. I think he's certainly be a popular captain play, eating up a lot of salary with that 11.2 salary as a baseline. As captain, of course, salary is going to go up 1.5x to 16.8. For Kyren, to me, I think he is a flex play. There's certainly some ways you can get away from him. I think the ways you would try to get away from him would be playing more of a Saints dominant build where, let's say, Chris Olave gets going early, Olave and Kamara maybe score some points, and then you do see Matthew Stafford having to press the ball downfield more to get the ball to Cooper Kupp, to get the ball to Puka Nacua, maybe even to Tyler Higbee. I think that's the way you fade Kyren, but I don't know that I want to do that for a hand build, so let's put Kyren in as my first pick in his hand build that we will do first off here. So the chat as well. Smash the like, smash the wife. I think that means if you hit the like button, your wife will allow you to penetrate her. So there we go. That's how that goes. Let's rock. Good morning, all. Steven here. Shout out him. Kyle here. Appreciate you guys being here, of course, as always. And listen to those guys and smash the like button because they know they're vets of Splash Play. So they know how it goes here, in which you hit likes and then I do a little dance. Is how it goes each time. Let's keep going here with some picks that we want to put into this hand build of the lineup. And what else do we want to go to here? Of course, got to get a lot from the Rams side. 25 implied points for them, 21 implied points for the Saints, as you can see scrolling beneath me on the screen. I think let's think about the Saints side a little bit more. So Chris Olave coming back in, price tag down from him missing that last game. He is $8,600 on this slate, which is kind of crazy. Projection from him from Stochastic, not that great, actually. Kamara projects better. One thing I also have to point out up top, which I think is going to be really important for this slate, last week, Alvin Kamara, 32 snaps. Last week, Jamal Williams, 29 snaps. Kamara did get the red zone work, but it is more of a pure timeshare than it might seem, certainly, because nobody talks about the Saints backfield with good reason. But I've also been kind of watching and wondering, why does Alvin Kamara never have a breakout game? He's not getting the same amount of targets that he got early in the year, but he definitely is, still involved enough. But Kamara getting 32 snaps compared to 29 for Jamal Williams does speak to the fact that even if he is getting 21 intended touches, and they're basically feeding the ball in every touch that he's out there for the most part, 66% of the time, based on that 32 snap count, and him getting 21 intended touches here last week. Kamara's getting the ball, but he's just not out there enough. So it does seem like there's a little bit of a cap on the ceiling for touches he can get, where he's getting fed better than any running back on a pure touch basis in terms of that, percentage of touches he's getting than any other running back in the league if he's going to keep up this rate where he's getting 21 intended touches on 32 snaps. So Kamara really can't get up more. So I think that, to me, Olave is the more interesting play. And I think that's how I want to play it here. Rams on the year, 0 EPA drop back per pass, 0 EPA drop back per drop back as well. So basically 0 flat for both of those metrics, where, of course, the expected points added metric that I cite always from Sports Info Solutions is a very important one because it tells you how much above average players are contributing to creating points, how much above average defenses are allowing points. And in this spot, if the Rams defense is going to be net neutral, I think Olave gets fed here. So I'm actually going to go with Olave as my captain. We'll say that it is a little bit more of a come from behind script for Kyren Williams. Obviously, we're in LA as well. Could see a lot of Saints fans in the house, so maybe it even gets closer to being more like a Saints home game than it certainly would normally be for a team on the road. So I think let's try to play that build more. I still think that Kamara, the workload being there, is noteworthy enough that I feel like we should still go to Kamara. Maybe that's what we do, though, is we go to Jamal Williams instead and hope Kamara fails. Maybe get Taysom Hill in. Let's do that. All right, so we're going to try to get a Taysom Hill roster going. Taysom Hill, one thing that he'll benefit from this matchup, Rams defense versus QB runs, one of the worst marks in the league, 0.73 EPA per QB rush. So basically almost giving up a point per any time that a QB is running against them. So for Taysom Hill, I think he makes sense in that front. Obviously, of course, if we're not playing Alvin Kamara, Taysom Hill gains in value because if Kamara doesn't get that red zone work, if he doesn't get those touchdowns, he's not going to get there. So who gets it instead? Taysom, a very likely guy to do that. And Chris Olave, we know, obviously be nice if he puts up a 2-touchdown game at captain, but he can also just get the yardage and get that field, have the 100-yard day, maybe 1 touchdown, and that's enough for him to make captain. So let's put Taysom Hill in here instead. And now we can theoretically get in one more stud. And the question would be Cooper Kupp or Puka Nacua. Very big price tag difference and very big box score difference as well, where Cooper Kupp put up that 28.1 points last week, 28.5 the week before against the Ravens. Puka Nacua, though, last 2 games, under 14, under 10. I think that kind of makes Puka the more logical play to go to here. Matchup-wise against the Saints D on the year, so they are funneling a lot of targets towards the slot. 50% target rate allowed to the slot, compared to 24% target rate out wide. Cooper Kupp does get more slot targets, only 60 in the slot, compared to only 15 out wide for him on the year, whereas Puka Nacua tends to go out wide a little bit more. 51 and 79 is the split for him, wide being 51 targets, and the slot getting 79 targets on the year. So I think that Cooper Kupp is the slot guy. So Cooper Kupp's the bigger beneficiary. But the game theory, and again, what we talk about here, and this is the thing that I've had to deal with this year as well, where I love the advanced analytics stuff, but sometimes when you have the advanced analytic play, where A.J. Brown a couple weeks ago for a showdown, he was the advanced analytics play because it was a man-D matchup. He ends up not getting there, and it really mattered more so that the ownership was going to be there. I think the ownership is going to be there more for Kupp. So let's just not worry about the advanced analytics for this one part of the build. Let's go Puka Nacua instead, because as I try to say here a lot, ownership more important than any sort of like things that you have as an inkling of a play, just because of the fact, especially for wide receivers, how volatile that is. Puka Nacua, I think, is a more interesting play if he's going to be less owned than Kupp, but I could be wrong about this one. So we'll see when we get to the ownership projections in a minute. But I think Puka Nacua going to come in a little bit less easily than Cooper Kupp. And Cooper Kupp, the matchup certainly looks better as well. But if the ownership is so high, I'd rather just get leverage on a lower-owned guy. I think New Orleans would scheme hard to slow down Kupp. I would agree, but you can't really ignore like a 50% target rate, to the slot, which is double what they're allowing out wide. Like that's a really big tendency. Like that's, it's a very low on the amount of targets allowed wide. It's very high on the amount of targets allowed to the slot. So there's only so much you could change in 1 week. And I don't know that they're necessarily going to be able to stop Cooper Kupp, especially if the Rams' intent is to put him, over and over again where they're at their weakest, where the Saints D rather is at their weakest. So I think that I agree for the most part. Like you would think they sell it, stop Cooper Kupp, but to some teams, I think they're probably treating Puka Nacua the same way, where if you allow Cooper Kupp to get his, but you don't let Puka get his, maybe that sort of impedes the Rams offense overall. I think that's how they would try to view it, but who knows? Says you aren't a wild man ignoring those analytics. It's not about ignoring, though. It's just that ownership matters a lot more than what's a good play. Because if people get funneled, whether it be because of projections, whether it be because of the natural salary and all that, whenever people get funneled to one thing, like the advantage you have from knowing the analytics just goes away because the ownership is already there. So that's something I've been trying to be more mindful of because we've run into it enough times at showdowns this year. The last 3 teams have schemed to slow down Kupp. Yes, and as we saw, that has not worked out well. All right, flex. Let's see what else we can do in the flex. I do know I did look at the cruncher a little bit before this one. Lucas Havershik is going to come up a lot in lineups today. I think that you fading him would certainly be the most appealing option you can do. Obviously, a lot of ways that you can do that. We do have DeMarcus Robinson at a fairly cheap price tag. He basically ran the same amount of routes last week as Cooper Kupp did, as Puka Nacua did. The one downside for him is Tutu Atwell's coming back in after being in concussion protocol, or is expected to be back in, coming off concussion protocol. So if that's the case, DeMarcus Robinson probably sees that route share come down, whereas Puka and Cooper Kupp are not going to get touched. So that's a little bit of an interesting spot for sure with DeMarcus Robinson coming down. And Robinson as well, also posting some nice box score games recently, at least relative to a cheap guy like Robinson has been. Kind of think Tutu is interesting. What are the price tags for Higbee and Tutu? Let's see that. Higbee, 5,800. Box score wise, I think that Robinson will be more popular to people. I also think that people might not adjust to the fact that Tutu is going to be back in. So I would say that Higbee probably less popular than DeMarcus Robinson. We'll see what the projections give us. Where's Tutu at? Tutu's all the way down here. Tutu coming back in at 2,800. I wonder if that makes him a little bit too popular. I think Robinson's going to have some fans today, and I think Atwell's going to have some fans for people trying to get leverage on Robinson. But I think that kind of leaves Higbee ignored. So I'm going to go Higbee instead because I think we do want to fade Havershik here. Again, he's going to be a good projection play, but he's going to come up a lot in an optimizer, I believe, based on what I saw before the show. So let's go that way. And then We could put in a defense, which wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. Guys like Lynn Bowden Jr., Keith Kirkwood, probably a little bit less valuable now that Chris Olave is back in. And they also didn't run around a lot of routes last week, even with Olave out. The only guy who really got a big increase in routes, and even then it wasn't that big. Rashid Shaheed ran 36, and I think A.T. Perry ran just under 30. The rest of the guys even less than that. So nothing really to take away in terms of a guy, pulling away from the pack besides Shaheed, who's already been pulled away from the pack. Moreau, God, this is really ugly down here. I do not like this area and being in this area. What's Davis Allen priced at? No, I don't want to play Higbee and Davis Allen. Obviously, Davis Allen snaps have come down quite a bit. Davis Allen, 2,200 last week, only got one target because Higbee was back in. I personally believe that Davis Allen is right now a tight end with more juice than Tyler Higbee, obviously going off that one game against the Ravens where he absolutely went nuts. But the eye test for that one and also his EPA metrics on the year, like for next year, Davis Allen, the guy to watch, even maybe for the rest of this year if Higbee somehow gets hurt. Tutu, no, because I really do think that Tutu gets chopped. Maybe A.T. Perry. A.T. Perry gets some targets here, and that's what pulls away. And Jamal Williams is too expensive. Let's get a Kamara legacy game. Look, I'm rooting for Kamara for the sake of best ball, but I just don't know that it's that great. Would I do any double tight end with Olave back? I don't think it's the worst idea. I mean, Juwan Johnson is price tag 4,000. I can't put him in this lineup, but he's definitely going to get less work with Taysom back in, as you kind of see. Though, honestly, it's really not that much less work because he got 2 targets last week and then got 2 targets the week before that where there was no Taysom Hill, so it might not matter that much. But yeah, I think 2 tight ends are viable just because, like, Taysom's not really a tight end. Like, he's being used in different ways, so I would say Taysom and Juwan Johnson are fine to play. I wouldn't, like, advocate for it or anything, but I think they're fine to play. Yeah, match up for against tight ends for the Rams. 12% target rate to tight ends, which is pretty high. 0.1 EPA, though, which is pretty low. I mean, it's obviously above average, but not that great. All right, we got to fit in one more guy here. Who's it going to be? I feel like one of the defenses definitely screams out, but then we're probably too chalky. All right, fuck it. You know what? Jimmy Graham. Let's do that. Jimmy Graham. So we'll say that the way that Alvin Kamara doesn't get the red zone / goal line / it's inside the 10-yard line kind of touchdowns rather, would be that Taysom Hill takes a touchdown away. Jimmy Graham takes a touchdown away. We then also get leverage on Juwan Johnson, who's going to have some amount of ownership, I'm sure, probably around 20%. So I think this works. Jimmy Graham, a pure showdown tight end who on the year is getting a lot of stupid touchdowns that he probably shouldn't get. Now he's had a touchdown in the last 3 games, which I did not realize. So we are picking, I think, a player that might get a little bit overowned because of this box score, where 1 catch for a touchdown, 2 catches for 1 touchdown, So we're playing into it, but let's just do it. Double New Orleans tight end. Charles wins. Let's do it. Chris Olave, Kyren Williams. We got Taysom Hill. I always want to say Tyreek, but it is, in fact, the much weaker T Hill. Puka Nacua, Tyler Higbee, Jimmy Graham. This is going to be the team we put in. And we'll see. I think the defenses maybe a little bit less owned would be interesting if that's the case. But the salary, we weren't leaving enough on the table, I think, to justify putting one of the defenses in. So that's how we're going to roll. Let me make sure these are most recently updated projections. And of course, if you want to use the data that I use along with the tools that I use, what the fuck, man? I logged in already this morning. If you want to use the data I use and the tools that I use, you also can check the link in the description down below. Stochastic, save 15% off of any NBA or NFL data package. And that includes the sim stuff as well that I use here on the show. So check that out. Check the link in the description if you want to play along and use the same things that I use here on stream, which I would swear by as part of your process. Even if you do other projections as well, I do chop my projections with Stochastic and ETR. You do the same process there for what we do on the stream. So definitely keep that in mind here and check out the link in the description for 15% off. And it's the only discount they have this holiday season. So take advantage of it if you want to get in on Stochastic for a lot of tournaments coming up. All right. 6 catches and 4 TDs on the year. Very efficient. Some could say due for negative regression, but not me, apparently, with that hand build. Top projected players according to Stochastic right now. Kyren Williams, a 20 flat projection. So he would be popping up in a lot of lineups, you would think. Cooper Kupp, 18.1 projection. He's a little bit lower in salary, a little bit lower in projection than Kyren Williams. Maybe gets less owned as a result, but we'll see what the difference is here. I think it's possible that Kyren and Puka come up a little bit more because of Cooper Kupp's salary, but we'll see in the optimizer in a moment. Matthew Stafford, 17.4 projection for him at a 10K salary. Alvin Kamara, 16.5 projection for him at a 10.8 salary. And Puka Nacua at number 5, 15.9 projection, 9.6 salary. With a little bit of a gap between Puka and Derek Carr, I think it's possible that Derek Carr might get in a few more lineups. And I'm kind of wondering if we're going to see Saints dominant builds because I did not look enough at the crunch to know that. But I think with Olave, Carr priced where they are cheaper, but not too far away in projection from guys like Stafford, Kamara, Kupp, I think it's possible you get a lot of Olave, Carr, Kyren in these builds, but let's see when we get there in a moment. Top value plays according to Stochastic right now. Saints D is right there. Do you think if you're going with a Rams heavy build, if you're going with Matthew Stafford at QB, Saints D putting that in is always one way to cut the ownership product. And we have seen that win a lot this year in Showdown, where you're playing the offense, you're playing the good parts, but you still play the opposing defense getting a touchdown in some way. You know, what usually going to be a defensive touchdown, maybe a few sacks. So Saints D certainly makes sense there. And on the year, Saints D getting pressured at 20% rate, which is okay. 24% blitz rate, which is also okay. Nothing too crazy they do defensively. 8% hurry rate, which is a little bit high. 3% interception rate, which is a little bit above average. Nothing they do on, naturally is going to go, the Saints D is a great play. But this projection, this value metric, and then playing Rams along with the Saints D, I think is kind of interesting. Kyron Williams, to 11-2 here. He's still a top value, so he's probably going to be in every lineup. Lucas Havershik, again, 48K or 4,800 salary. He's probably going to be in a lot of lineups as well, based on what I saw before the show. Stafford, Olave. So no $200 guys popping up as a value. So that is definitely going to force people more towards the middle. Also does make the $200 guys more interesting, even though obviously none of them have a good projection on them. Bryson Hopkins barely has a projection. Prentice barely has a projection. These are not guys to want to play, but if one of them hits, they're going to be low owned. So I guess that's how that goes. And I didn't even realize Marquez Callaway was back on the Saints. I guess Sean Payton got tired of his toy and sent him back home. That's how that goes. All right, ownership here. Let's keep it going. Top owned plays according to Stochastic. Number 1, Cooper Kupp, 55.5% ownership. Captain ownership, 12.5%. Kyron Williams, 55% ownership, 14% captain for him. Puka Nacua, number 3, 52% owned, 11% in captain. Matthew Stafford, 50% owned, 7% in captain. And Chris Olave, 45% owned, 9% in captain. These are your chalkiest players based on the slate. Cooper Kupp, I guess people may force their way to a little bit more. The projections, I think, do favor maybe getting a little more Olave and Derek Carr, but we'll see that in a moment. Guys under 10%. A.T. Perry under 10%. A.T. Perry still going to get some amount of rounds. Obviously, that's going to come down with Chris Olave back in. Rashid Shaheed, definitely the wide receiver 2, but A.T. Perry is a wide receiver 3. I think he's in the mix, 3,200, a price tag that's probably not going to cover too much. A.T. Perry, kind of interesting. Juwan Johnson as well. As Charles pointed out in the chat, and also as I pointed out by taking Jimmy Graham, I do think there is a logic for Juwan Johnson in as much as you're getting Taysom Hill in there. Taysom Hill is going to look more appealing because people, I think, will play the slate kind of like I just did, where if you're not playing Kamara, you then think the touchdowns could go to Taysom Hill a little bit more. But instead, you could just go to Juwan Johnson. And I think if people do play Jimmy Graham in any amount, if they do chase that box score, Juwan Johnson gains an appeal because he's just like a real tight end, whereas Jimmy Graham has been a very fluky touchdown tight end. So him at just a little bit above 10%. If he's not going to be 20% owned, I think that actually is a pretty good play. Royce Freeman definitely getting some touches behind Kyron Williams. One thing to point out, Kyron Williams lost 2 fumbles last week against the Commanders. Still didn't get benched in that game. So Royce Freeman, if he's going to get back in, maybe another 2 fumbles by Kyron can get him in. But it does feel like Royce, you basically have to subsist off of the touches that are not going Kyron's way. And that's not enough to really feel that comfortable about. Let's see. Taysom Hill, Taysom Hill being under 10%, I do like that play. Price tag ugly at 6,600, but honestly, like this could be the day. We know it happens once a year. Taysom Hill at captain would not be the craziest play to have in some amount. Obviously, you shouldn't go crazy with it, but if he's going to be 0% owned at captain, 7% in the flex, I think you take your shots there a little bit more. And obviously, I did in the hand build. So Taysom, again, that QB rush CPA the Rams allow is really noteworthy. The tight end targets that get funneled there is noteworthy. So I think Taysom Hill is a valid play, probably more than usual. And if he's going to be under 10% owned for a showdown, like you know what he can do, whether it's just making a roster or it is actually putting you over the top at captain. And if Taysom Hill goes off in best ball, I'm going to be so disappointed because I had so much Taysom Hill and don't think I advanced very much of it. Davis Allen still getting some amount of snaps. The amount of snaps that Davis Allen got last week, of course, we said 1 target, but Davis Allen still got 26 snaps last week. So he's in the mix. Higbee last week, by comparison, coming off the neck injury, got 59 snaps. Oh, no, excuse me, 47 snaps. So Higbee definitely more involved than Allen, but Allen in the mix enough that I think you can make a case to play him a little bit under 10%. Awkward salary at 2,200 as well, but Davis Allen, I think, certainly a valid play as well, even though he's probably less valid than Taysom, even relative to the salaries. Juwan Johnson is a great pivot off the Graham chalk. I would agree. I mean, I don't know that Graham's going to be chalk, but I think there's a potential for that for sure, just because of the fact that Graham has that box scores. And when people do see 3 touchdowns, they're like, well, I could get it one more time. And in reality, if that leads to Jimmy Graham being 20% owned, Jimmy Graham becomes an awful play. And I might have played into that with my hand build. All right, top players here, according to the optimizer. And of course, what we do with the Fantasy Cruncher optimizer is not meant to show you exactly what the field is going to play, but it is meant to show you where the math pushes people towards, because a lot of times when you're building lineups, you're using stochastic projections, you're using roto grinders projections, ETR projections, whatever. I don't know. Does anybody use roto grinders? I don't know why I listed them second. You're using whatever projections you use. And in point being, like, you're using whatever you use. And for the most part, you're going to land in similar constructions where just the math pushes you towards similar plays, unless you're purely hand building off the vibes, which most people are not doing these days. So the guys we're going to get into lineups a lot. Looks like Kyren Williams will be not in every lineup. Kyren Williams, 28% in captain, 68% in flex. So almost every lineup, getting in 96% of them, but not everyone. Chris Olave, 8% in captain, 72 in flex. So he's not in everyone. Foster Moreau getting in 52%. So another tight end from the Saints in play based on the projections. So nobody is in every lineup. So there's not an obvious fade to jump to right away, of course, as we always do in this show. And then sometimes, like, I mean, actually a lot of times it does work out. Sometimes, though, it's like on Monday Night Football where I talked about Jalen Hurts was the only guy in every lineup. So if you want to get different from the field, you don't play Jalen Hurts. Obviously, Jalen Hurts is the highest ceiling guy in that game. Ends up getting there as the 1 in a 5-1 for him as the captain. So, like, for Jalen Hurts, like, you know, it's a little bit easier to fade, or a little bit harder to fade, rather. Whereas for a player, if there were somebody here who's like 100%, like if Foster Moreau, we're getting in 100% of lineups, that tells you right away, maybe I just don't play Foster Moreau tonight. But there's nobody here who fits that criteria. So interesting to see, interesting to note, but nothing, man, I'm surprised by that one, actually. All right, other things we can look at here, team stacks. So 12 out of the 25 lineups have at least 4 Rams, but that's not enough to point to as being a thing to like worry about or try to get away from. So I would say that for this spot with, there really isn't anything trend-wise with the optimizer that I'm seeing that stands out. I think Havershik's going to be the big one, though. Havershik, 36% in the flex, coming at captain 16%, which is a lot of captain kicker. I don't think he'll get played that much, so my gut kind of tells me that Havershik at kicker is actually, or captain rather, is kind of an interesting play just because of the fact that he's not, like, he's coming up a good amount in the optimizer, but not so much that he's unavoidable. So I think Havershik is a much better play than I gave him credit for in that hand build. Obviously not a name people know. He did replace Crosby a couple weeks ago. I think Crosby's now retired. So Havershik is a guy that has not been on many slates, but can certainly get there. And especially if Kyren doesn't punch in touchdowns, or if the Rams don't get long touchdowns, like Havershik can get there in a meaningful way. Defenses both coming up equally, so no advantage to be had there. And then the kicker is coming up equally as well. So a lot of Havershik, a lot of Group A, a lot of the defenses, but nothing too crazy. I don't think there's actually much to take away from the optimizer this week, which is kind of a bummer. But the obvious players that are getting a lot of lineups, Olave getting in a lot, Kyren getting in a lot, Derek Carr getting in a lot. So we are not getting Cooper Kupp coming in as much naturally with the projections, even though he is very high in the ownership. So we'll figure this out as we go. But I think this is kind of an interesting thing to see, because it feels like you could play anybody. You're not really going to run into absolute chalk. But obviously, you know, Olave going to be in a lot. Kyren going to be in a lot. Those are the two main things to take away. Sims, let's check him out here. And of course, we're going to run the Sims right now. 30% to first, I believe. No, actually, it might be lower today. I think they dropped the prize pool for the Millie Maker, or the quote-unquote Millie Maker. Yeah, 300K to first, 1.25 million overall. So it's a 25% slate here. And we're going to run the Sims. And of course, what Stochastic does with their Sims, 10,000 lineups is what they build. And then to have them compete against each other 50,000 times, or 40,000 times, excuse me, is what they do on that one. I feel like I'm just off this morning. I woke up, kind of started doing work, and I feel like just doing work and then doing talking sometimes throws me off a little bit. But I would say in this spot, you know, that's the main thing to know, is that you're just trying to see where the pure math is, where the Sims are going to push people towards the most. And that's definitely another part where the optimizer tells you one part of the tale, Sims tell you the other part. And of course, that's what you get, of course, if you take that 50% off at Stochastic with a link in the description. Feel better about a kicker captain if the game is sloggy, and I don't think this will be that sloggy. Steven's had some really chalky takes lately, so I don't want to bury Steve here, but I would say that I don't like that doesn't matter. That, like, you thinking the game's not going to be sloggy, I don't think matters quite as much as trying to play unique builds. And because there is a 46-point implied total in this game, like for a showdown, that's not the way to think about it. The way to think about it is like, are people going to play this as a sloggy game? And if so, here's the kicker that can do that. And also sometimes like a kicker can be a reflection of a game where the team's moving the ball a lot, but they don't punch it in. Like that could be the other part of it, where they get the ball on the other side of the field over and over and over and over and over again. That's inherently not a sloggy game. So I think that's not the right way to look at that. But obviously, Steve's done what he's doing for the most part. But I think Steve's been coming out pretty chalky in the last few weeks. I do have to point that out to you, Steve, for yourself, if not for the chat. Cooper Kupp, Blake Grupe in the top ROI lineup right now. Kyren Williams, Lucas Havershik, Matthew Stafford, Royce Freeman. So 2 kickers here. So again, the Sims saying playing 2 kickers is going to be not the craziest thing to do here. So that's interesting to see. That's top ROI lineup. And because you are playing both kickers, I think you're getting unique enough with this one where you probably don't need to leave more salary on the table. So this is actually a valid lineup, at least based as of right now at 11:26 a.m. on the East Coast. Other lineups to look at here. Demarcus Robinson, captain. Do you think that's a little bit thinner with Tutu Atwell back in the mix? So Demarcus Robinson, captain, still in play, but not the most exciting one for sure. Stafford, Puka, okay. We'll take requests looking at lineup here. If you want me to look at a specific captain, let me know and drop it in the chat. Top exposure, guys. Matthew Stafford, number 1 overall, 55% in the flex, coming in everywhere. Puka Nacua, 41% in the flex. Actually, this is really not a lot of exposure either. So it feels like the Sims are actually flattening you out quite a bit in terms of your exposures, but we'll see what the captains we're getting. But this is really low, where they usually are pushing you towards somebody and saying, hey, get 80% or 60% of somebody in the flex. And the closest is Matthew Stafford here at 55. So that's a little bit surprising. 41% for Puka coming in with the Sims. Of course, these guys are all trying to get a little bit more in the field. Derek Carr, 39% in the Sims, trying to get you dead even with the field here at 0.4%. Kyren Williams, 37% overall, 5% less. So they're probably giving you more Kyren at captain would be my guess. But let's see that right now. Kyren Williams, 18% at captain is what they're recommending. So actually recommending you get less Kyren overall, which is a bit of a surprise. I do think that people will treat Kyren like he's a lock play today. So I get why that would be for the Sims, but I'm shocked to see them just being like, hey, just match Kyren and come in a little bit under even. But that's the play that they're suggesting here. So more kickers, less Kyren seems to be the Sim approach. Cooper Kupp, 17% exposure at captain. Matthew Stafford, 13%. So nobody really jumping out meaningfully. It kind of feels like a very flat slate, which means that for you guys out there, like, and this is a part of, again, like how I try to play showdowns, there isn't anything to really like strip away at where it's like people are going to really get forced there because the salaries are pretty fair, because both sides are priced, I think, pretty evenly relative to what this game total is. You could really build whatever lineups you want. So you could kind of do, I think, the kind of leans you want to do. I would say favoring onslaughts will be a little bit underowned this week because it is so evenly balanced. And I think people as well, because you see that implied total, you think, again, like Steven did, like you think that there's going to be more scoring in this game. I think people are going to be trying to play more 3-3s, more evenly balanced lineups. And if you do play a boat race kind of game, whether it be for the Saints or whether it be for the Rams, probably comes in a little bit underowned. All right, lineups with no QBs. Let's look at that. Lineup does not contain, and you could certainly make the case for to build a lineup like this today too, because obviously both Stafford and Carr, neither going to run very much at all, if at all. Lineup does not contain Carr. Top ROI lineup with that: Kyren Williams, Alvin Kamara, Cooper Kupp, Havershik, Rams, Royce Freeman. Says there's 2 dupes on this one. I don't even know that Royce Freeman gets duped at all. So I would say that playing Kyren at captain with Royce, definitely going to be lower owned than I think it would be represented here, despite the 49.8 salary. Rams D, Chris Olave, Cooper Kupp, Kyren Williams, Puka Nacua, Saints D. So this is a game script where you're saying basically nobody's getting touchdowns, I guess. Or if they are getting, no. This is a weird build. I don't think this is a good build to go to. Kyren Williams, Blake Grupe, Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, Rams, Saints. So you're playing this is a sloggy build for what Steven was talking about. I feel like I'm really shout out Steven today, but like for a sloggy build, like this is a sloggy build where you're saying Kyren Williams gets in there. I guess it could also be like a Kyren Williams just scores a lot kind of game. But when you have both defenses in, like this is a slog game. Like I would say actively, where you have kicker plus 2 Ds. But yeah, these lineups are all pretty gross. There's a lot, not ones that I would advocate for. Can we see Tutu captain? For the record, I would not advocate for that one at all. You're running up against 2 factors where one, Demarcus Robinson has been legitimately very good. Number 2, Tutu coming off concussion protocol, has been out of practice for a little bit. So I would personally not advocate for Tutu, but Colin's a member, so you can make his own decisions. Here's 2 lineups. None of them in the top 150. So the good news is that a Tutu captain would be low owned, but I don't think that's the greatest play in the world. Tutu, Kamara, Grupe, Cooper Kupp, Derek Carr, Stafford. I think that's fine. Obviously, taking 2-2 means you're pulling away from Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. Still doesn't mean that you can't play him in lineups, but I think the kind of game script logic of this one does work. 2-2, Kamara, Kupp, Kyren, Matthew Stafford, Royce Freeman. Yeah, if you're going to play 2-2, like you can't play the whole salary because people will play 2-2 to jam in all the studs. So I think if you're playing Royce Freeman, that's okay to use more of the salary. But this one, like I think gets duped a lot more than it probably seems. This one at 48.4, if you want to play 2-2, probably a little better. 2-2, Chris Olave, Kyren Williams, Havershik, Stafford, Puka Nacua. You're playing a lot of Rams for 2-2 to be a captain because 2-2's got to get there with, he's probably got to have like at least a 20-point day, I would think, to get to captain. Maybe 15 to 20. So for 2-2, I think this makes sense salary-wise, but the actual lineup, that doesn't do a lot for me. Olave captain, sure. Beating up on Steve here. We go with Chris Olave next. Chris Olave, Alvin Kamara, Derek Carr, Havershik, Puka, Royce Freeman. Again, the Royce part of it, I think, makes that less and the fact you're not playing Kyren and playing Royce over him, I think this is a playable lineup. Doesn't do a whole lot for me, but it is a playable lineup. Chris Olave, Alvin Kamara, Derek Carr, Kyren Williams, Royce Freeman, Saints. Man, I think you could actually, the more interesting lineup to me would be to play Olave captain without Derek Carr. Because, like, obviously, Carr's going to have a higher shot of getting there. But I think Carr projected just well enough that he's going to get forced into more lineups with Olave at captain. They're going to do better not playing Carr with him just to try to get away from the field. Let's see if we can find one here. Okay. Olave, Group A, Matthew Stafford, Puka Nacua, Rashid Shaheed, Tyler Higbee. So we are playing a 3-3 here. So we are kind of in that morass of crowded lineups, perhaps. But we are not playing Carr. We are playing Matthew Stafford with a double. We're also getting another receiver in who could theoretically outscore Carr. A kicker could outscore Carr. I think that's probably my favorite Olave line, despite being the 49.9 salary. Because you are fading Kyren here. You are fading some chalk. And I think the construction's unique enough that you can get there with a 49.9 salary. Tasted captain, please. And good. Steven doesn't feel beat. I just, look, I think sometimes that, like, when you guys give a take, like, I have to explain at least the way that I see it. And I think, too, with showdowns, like, and the way that we all want to play, it does often kind of include, like, hey, you're trying to play the most likely outcome. But in reality, no Taysom Hill captains at all. So, because they didn't project it for ownership, so that makes sense. But Taysom Hill not coming up naturally at captain. So that's unfortunately how it's going to be for right now. What else can we look at here? Carr captain be kind of interesting, I think. Even though I think Carr's not a great play in the flex, if he's coming along with the ride with a pass catcher of his at captain. Carr at captain could be good because you can do a Carr double and then try to get unique there. We're saying that Carr has a lot of success passing the ball, or at least funnels the ball around more. And we do know that the Saints, for the most part, even though Olave is like the alpha target earner, they do spread the ball around pretty well. So Carr captain, let's see if we can find a good one. Carr, Shaheed, one pass catcher, I think, with Carr captain would not do it for me. Here, this one looks good. So Carr, Olave, Robinson, Juwan Johnson, Kyren, Shaheed. So we are saying then the Rams are going to get production through Kyren. Do you think Demarcus Robinson probably a little bit overprojected, but he's fine. Obviously, the lowest owned of Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, so you're getting leverage on both of those guys. Derek Carr has to be, I think, at least with 2 pass catchers, if not 3, to have a shot at making captain. I mean, we're basically saying that these guys all get like 15 to 20 points, and then that combined weight of Carr gets him above 20, and that allows him to be the captain. So I think that build would be my favorite Derek Carr one. Let's see. Oh, shout out here. Jason had some big wins on Probably, actually. Not a great time to promote Probably. I'm trying to wrap this up, but Jason did a parlay off of Probly yesterday, which I'm very displeased with because we're not supposed to do Probly parlays. That's never the goal we do. But Jason actually paid for his entire year yesterday with the wins he had from Probly. So, of course, check out Probly, my sports betting app that's been crushing every day, of course, content-wise, as well as for people who are members. So check it out, probably.com/subscribe. Promo code SPLASH will save you 50%, of course. Top-performing sportsbooks around the world. We pull the true probability from that and then grade out legal sportsbook opportunities at probably.com. So check that out. Other captains we can look at here. Who else would speak to me as captain before we close out? Who's interesting? Let's look at a Puka captain, because I do think Puka captains probably get a little bit less owned. Taysom captain seems like it'll be unknown. Time to light some cash on fire. I agree it'll be unknown. I think that'll be unknown for a reason. But again, like if nobody's playing Taysom, those are the slates. Don't load up on Taysom. If you're playing a 20 max, don't play 20 Taysom Hill lineups. But like if you're playing a 20 max, put in 5 Taysom lineups. I think if you really want to go that way, And I would say 5, like for captain and maybe and the flex. But I wouldn't do like more than half your lineups to Taysom overall. And that's like being the most aggressive possible just because it is a narrow needle to thread for the opportunity. Puka Nacua captain, A.T. Perry, Kyren Williams, Havershik, Matthew Stafford, Tyler Higbee. So we are going very heavy Rams here. A 5-1 Rams. A.T. Perry is the bring back. That's a tough needle to thread, but a high ROI lineup is one of the top 150. So that's kind of interesting Puka Nacua build. Another 5-1 with Puka. Puka, Group A, Cooper Kupp, Demarcus Robinson, Stafford, Rams. This is one where the Saints fail outright, I would assume, where the Saints just can't get a touchdown, but kick enough field goals maybe to keep it competitive, and then the Rams are just putting up enough production across these guys. You're also fading Kyren Williams in this build, so that does make it inherently a little bit more unique. Again, Kyren not popping up, but 100% of the optimizer lineups was coming close enough that if you fade Kyren, that's probably the closest you can get to like chopping away from the field. Man, so many 5-1s with Puka. This is a 4-2, but Puka, Kamara, Group A, Demarcus Robinson, Havershik, Stafford. 2 kicker lineups, man. 2 kicker lineups look pretty good. I think that's probably the most interesting build to me that we've seen for these ones, at least. Showdown's a test ground for wild ideas. Yeah, and I think that's the part of it, too, is really trying to be mindful of the fact that, like, you're not really trying to make your entire portfolio the wild takes. You just have to kind of be mindful of that because that's something I fall into the trap too sometimes as well, where I'm selecting Gerald Everett lineups or whatever, the one week that he hit. And it's like, you're selecting so much Gerald Everett. And it's like, you end up then, if he doesn't hit, you're completely fucked. And obviously that's an aggressive style play. If it does hit, you can pay more dividends by having more lineups in the field in. But the same token, like if that play fails, there's a reason these guys aren't getting played in every lineup. And that's sort of the risk point if you play like a Taysom and captain kind of thing. Even Taysom in the flex, like Taysom in the flex comes with some amount of risk. The low ownership, I think, mitigates that risk a little bit. Kamara, Demarcus Robinson, Havershik, Stafford, Puka Nacua, Rams. So that's a Kamara lineup. I think that makes sense enough. It's a 5-1 build as well with Kamara at captain. I don't love that quite as much as like a Jalen Hurts because Kamara can easily get game scripted away, can also just not have the ball in his hands quite as much. But that build is the top ROI one for a reason. So that's one to highlight. Kamara, Group A, Kupp, Carr, Juwan Johnson, Havershik. So we are getting a 4-2 for the Saints here. A Kupp and Havershik. It's an okay lineup. Best 5-1 or even a 4-2 just to unchalk my butt. I can't sort by 5-1s here, so there's not an easy way to do that. It's part of why I export and use Excel for my stuff, so I can then just grab a bunch of 5-1s or 4-2s. But yeah, I don't know. Here, I'm just gonna scroll through, pause the screen if you see one. I don't know. Here's a 4-2. Saints, Group A, Olave, Kupp, Derek Carr, Kyren Williams. So I think it's a chalky 4-2. Saints D, pretty tough to hit as well. But it is a 4-2. Saints D at captain. And a decent ROI. So again, like everything is in play for the slate a little bit more than usual, where you're getting a mix of captains here. Again, we're getting Puka, Stafford, Kupp. We're getting, I guess, a lot of Puka, Stafford, Kupp. Getting Carr, getting Higbee, getting Olave, getting Kyren, getting Saints, getting Kyren. Like you're getting Shaheed. You're getting a little bit of everything here. So if you really have a strong lead at captain, I would say today is a day to try to push your advantage there because I think captain ownership is going to be a lot more flat than usual. I would still expect the field to get a lot more Kyren than the ownership projections have. Again, we had Kyren, or Stochastic had Kyren rather, at under 15%. If I had to guess, Kyren gets closer to 20 just because people do love Kyren and do think he's like mini McCaffrey, which is actually, factually correct. Not as talented as McCaffrey, not as explosive as McCaffrey, but the usage is like McCaffrey-esque as close as anybody in the league besides Austin Eckler last year. So I would say that the one thing I would point out is like, I think Kyren ends up a chalky captain. Besides that, though, if you want to push in on Olave, if you want to push in on Cooper Kupp, like I think those get a little bit less owned than they normally would be because you could kind of justify playing a lot of different guys as captain this week. 3 takeaways to build unique lineups tonight. Number one would be, this is a tough one to advocate for this. I mean, I guess it's the Taysom Hill part of it. That stands out to me. Taysom Hill under 10% in the flex, 0% in captain. The upside has not been there for him lately, so I think that kind of allows him to go under the radar. Do expect Jimmy Graham to get in some amount of lineups because of that box score watching the people will do. Again, as historical anomalies pointed out earlier, I believe somebody pointed out, 6 catches, 4 touchdowns. Like that's something that is not repeatable. It's not a thing that can occur over and over and over again. People will play it on a showdown. My instinct was to play it on a showdown. So I think that that's going to end up, a thing that happens a lot. So you're getting direct leverage on that potential play. You're also getting Juwan Johnson as a potential leverage point. But Taysom Hill, just like we know Taysom Hill can put up 20, can even put up 30 if things really broke his way. And also, frankly, like if you don't have Taysom Hill in best ball, he's going to ruin this week if Taysom Hill goes off. So I would play a little bit more Taysom Hill than you're comfortable with, especially if he is going to be a guy that could potentially kill you in best ball this year. Number 2 would be, I think Havershik's a good play. I think he'll be played a little bit more by sharp players. So if you are going to Havershik, keep that in mind that you're playing against like a lot of the sim bros, a lot of the projection bros, a lot of the top players in the world who I imagine will have a little bit more Havershik. But kickers are coming up a lot, and not just Havershik, but both kicker lineups I think work pretty well. I think Havershik, a captain, again, like it doesn't mean it's a slog game. It just means that there aren't touchdowns going on, but you can see a lot of yardage produced. And then the Rams getting that side of the field, and then it's field goal, field goal, field goal, field goal as the Saints offense just kind of peters out. So I would say that Havershik is live at captain, but really like Group A Havershik lineups look better than 2 kicker lineups normally would look as well. Number 3 thing to look at here to get unique. I think playing Stafford and Carr at captain will go a little bit under-owned. Both guys, again, don't run very much. The floor is not great, but if you are putting him with 2-3 pass catchers, that's how both Stafford and Carr get there. And because the skill position guys, the skill position guys have a lot better shot at hitting. But if all the skill position guys kind of get in a morass of like 15 to 20 points, then the QB can get there. If he's helping those guys all get to that day, and it's like, I don't know, 5 for 50 for Cooper Kupp with a TD, 6 for 40 with a TD for Puka. Like that's probably enough to get Stafford in if he just throws 1 touchdown to Kyren Williams or Higbee or Robinson or Tutu, whoever the case may be. But I think those 3 QB builds are going to be a little bit under-owned. And this is a game too where if you think it's going to be explosive, like I think trying to play the QB side a little bit more could have some appeal. But again, this is a weird slate. Like there really isn't anything to obviously strip away with. And that's what I do the best on, trying to give you guys takes. So I think more than ever, you could probably play the stuff you really believe in the most on this slate, as long as it's not Kyren Williams the captain, because that's going to be pretty well due. But there we go, guys. Again, you heard Jason earlier in the video, again, hitting on parlays at Probably. So check out probably.com/subscribe. Using the promo code SPLASH will save you 50%. And that means you can get in for under $10 for 1 month of our data and get a feel for it for yourself. Play with it over the holidays. But of course, you can also pay for a year to get it under $250. And again, Jason paid off for, I think, his entire year of Probably that he had very graciously paid for and bought a membership with. But pay for that with 1 parlay he hit. And I don't advocate for parlays, but if you're going to hit them, more power to you. So again, check it out, probably.com/subscribe. And check out the video I'm going to do right after this one at Probably App, breaking down the best bets today for NBA. And of course, follow me at Chris Spags, follow the show at Splash Play Pod. If you want to build lineups like I just did, check the link in the description. Stochastic, 15% off, the only deal they will have. Get NBA sims, get NFL sims, get all the data as well for yourself. Check it out at Stochastic. And I'll be back with you guys tomorrow for the main slate video. I'm not sure if I'm going to do the Saturday split again, just because I kind of hurt the main slate video. I don't know. We'll figure it out tomorrow here. Fridays on Splash Play. Always a fun time. And I'll see you guys then. And shout out to the Squirt Squad as well for helping me put on the show. Hit the join button down below to get your name on this list as well and be part of the producers, the executive producers of Splash Play. I'll see you guys tomorrow for more. So please subscribe before you go. Hit the like button, and I'll see you guys then. Good luck. Bye.